What's going on, everyone? So set 5 releases in short order, and we're going to talk a little bit about the potential decks that are going to show up. Now, this is not necessarily a top 5 meta list or anything like that. I do think some of these decks that we're going to talk about are in the top 5 meta, but there are more lists that I am very curious about, the decks to really watch out for, whether or not the strategies that they're going to be entailing are actually going to work out for one reason or another, whether they're going to kind of end up in the A tier or they truly are going to end up in the S tier. I'll probably have another video shortly in the next coming weeks talking about what I think will be showing up for the Galactic Championship. But for today, let's talk about some decks that I think should be on your watch list. A big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Let's dive into it. First one up, we've got Mother Talzin. So this one's brand new from set 5. A lot of the cards in the list are brand new. And, well, this is really powerful. Talzin, really just an amazing leader in of itself. Having this action, especially in Premier, lots of force units to kind of back it up in the early game, and most importantly, deploying on 5 as a 3/7 as a force unit herself, and getting that -1/-1 can just take over a board. It could just take over a board. And couple that with a lot of cheap interaction like Force Throw, Sorceress Blast, Drain Essence, or even Force Lightning in some situations is going to be absolutely amazing. Force Lightning and Force Throw are the 2 cards that are on the watch list for FFG, and I do think that they are incredibly powerful. So putting them both in the same deck, guess what? You're going to find some pretty good success with. You have a bunch of new cards alongside the new Force base, which is Secretive Sage, Sorceress Blast, Drain Essence, all amazing. One of the kind of hidden OPs about this deck, in my opinion, is actually Fallen Lightsaber. This card on Talzin is now going to allow you to deal 1 to all the ground units and shrink them down with Talzin, making her an absolute monster of a unit. We also have really powerful new 4-drops, and honestly, as with any list, there's very big modifications that you can make. Qi'ra, one of the more exceptional units in the game as a Sentinel if you can have the Force, and it can be an absolute brick wall. Darth Tyrannus is an ambusher, but you also have things like Talzin's Assassin that can be in this place, and other options as well. Talzin's Assassin, like I said, being one of the better ones if you want to swap out Darth Tyrannus for, Talzin's Assassin. I found Tyrannus to be quite solid, but again, more options. Gideon is an absolute win con on its own. This is one of the things that you could play some early units, play a Gideon when Talzin comes down, control the board, get a lot of value out of Talzin's action as well as her -1/-1 on flip, on attack is what really is the value from Talzin. But then you can back this up on the next turns with, Sentinels or 4-drops or even other units, and then pair with, again, very cheap interaction. And then you got the late game power of being in aggression villainy, Vigilance, like Avengers, Snoke, Palpatines, Crate Dragons, and just take over that section as well, which is really tough for a lot of decks to deal with. This is just very powerful. It's very likely for you to get to the late game because of Talzin's controlling options with cheap interaction, but then you can also take over the early game by just playing a couple units and then putting on pressure for your opponent, and then they're on the back foot, forced to deal with your units, and you can then curve out into your late game powerful threats. So again, lots of modifications you could go with this list. Another thing that with Talzin is that there's an option to go with ECL or Data Vault as well, with a new Vader ECL or Timely Intervention Vader, more control with Ramp. That is a really nice option. But this one in particular, the reason why I am curious about it is because of the 2 cards in Force Lightning and Force Throw that are they powerful enough to make Talzin Red a better option than Command Talzin or even the more Command Villainy Vigilance control decks that we're already seeing? Well, I think there is an option there, and I do find that Force Throw and Force Lightning are exceptional up against the more aggro focused decks alongside Sorceress Blast and Drain Essence. This deck could be very scary. And if Darth Vader is a deck to be worried about, Talzin can shut that deck down. The new Darth Vader from set 4, this thing, you got so many cheap events that you can actually knock out every single one of their units because of Talzin's action. It basically negates Darth Vader's action, and then you couple that with just Talzin deploying and then getting an attack in every single turn, going to put on pressure but also shrink their units down. This deck is one to watch out for. The next one on the list is one that you've seen quite a bit at this point, but I do think it is exceptionally powerful. It attacks on so many angles and really is a scary deck to go up against. There are so many variations of Obi-Wan, and honestly, you could take Obi-Wan and play Vigilance, you could be playing Cunning, and you could play Aggression. I think there's all merit to all three of those decks being options in the meta here, at least at an A tier, to be honest. Obi-Wan Red, you get the Force Throw and all the other aggression cards coming in with Legends of the Force. But to be honest, Obi-Wan Blue is the strongest that at least I have fought up against, both as and against with various decks. You get the Virgin's Tempo, which is a downside. Don't get me wrong. That is a big downside. 25 HP comparatively to, well, 28 HP if you're going to play yellow or red, but also just compared to 30 or 33 HP that you're seeing in the meta is very, well, risky in theory. But the thing that this deck does is absolutely scales you out of control. You have multiple different units that can absolutely run the entire game once you start putting them down and getting experience tokens on them. Something like a Gunji can become a 3/6 on turn 2, which now starts just murdering units. But then more importantly, if you're up against those aggressive decks, like let's say Sabine or even Quinlan in most cases, you can curve out with like Gunji in a General's Blade, and they usually don't have all that many answers to that strategy. And that means that you're just ramping incredibly hard and going to be able to deploy things like Blue Leader or Torrent Attack or Qi'ra on the following turns. If that's not the case, just take, for example, Jedi Consular on turn 1 up against other decks. This immediately provides you with turn 2 a 5-drop consistently, unless your opponent immediately deals with it or you don't have initiative. Well, you're free to go and you drop Blue Leader or you drop Torrent Attack or you drop Qi'ra or Bright Hope or whatever it is. Even if it's not something too crazy, you could even like curve out into multiple units, which is an exceptional play as well. Something like Jedi Consular. Okay, I use the Force. I'm going to drop in my 2-drop like Yaddle plus a 3-drop like Axe or Blue Leader or whatever it is. It is just absolutely incredible. And then you get to actually get to the point where you're deploying Obi-Wan and just passing a ton of experience around. That gives you enough early game, mid game pressure to, okay, if you're up against aggro decks, you can easily scale out of control. You have a lot of Sentinels with Obi-Wan, Qi'ra, Bright Hope. You have a good amount of Restore with Yaddle and some other options that you can play in the deck. It doesn't have to be limited to what you're seeing here. You also have exceptional late game. The new Calorin Beck is an amazing card. You have Luke's and you have the new Yoda, which if you're able to get to Yoda, he is a really good payoff. And you also have, well, Yoda as another healing option up against those aggressive decks, although it is a little bit later in the game. And then you have an amazing bunch of sideboard options to deal with all sorts of various decks. It is an incredible list. And again, Cunning can be an option. You have a little bit more disruption in terms of like tempo plays with that deck and a little bit more aggressive nature with things like Vernestra or even Youngling Padawan to get you a 3/4 on turn 1. You've got the aggression version, which gives you, as I said, Force Throw, which is an amazing card. Adi Gallia is a great 2-resource play, and a bunch of other things like Mace, Windu, Crate Dragons for late game. You have so many different options. There's just so many great Force payoffs, which is something that I was really waiting for, but it actually is the case. Things like Shatterpoint, Qi'ra, Jedi Consular, the Yoda, all good enough Force payoffs, and in some cases absolutely disgustingly good that, well, it's worth taking 3, 5, 7, 8 HP off of your base. This is a deck that I'm very curious about. And Obi-Wan in general is a leader that I'm very curious about to see if he truly ends up as one of the meta decks. Next up, we've got Qi'ra. And this one is the Data Vault version. But one of the things I'm most curious about with Qi'ra and what we're going to be watching for is it worth it to be running Energy Conversion Lab? Now, right now, Qi'ra Data Vault is so oppressive. I shouldn't say oppressive because we've had Boba Fett, Jango, and like Han 2 or Han 1 back in like set 2 and set 3 that were truly oppressive in their metas. But this is just one of the best decks in the meta in set 4. And one of the things that it does super well is be able to control the board with like a Qi'ra Flip plus Overrank Barrage. Now, because the meta has shifted more towards mid-range, value-oriented plays, I could absolutely see dropping Data Vault, even though you're losing 8 HP, and going for ECL simply because of a single card in Darth Vader. Darth Vader is so disgustingly good, and the fact that you can curve Darth Vader into another Darth Vader makes it one of the most oppressive curve outs in the entire game, that I am really interested to see if Qi'ra is going to go to the direction of ECL. For this one, as far as I've found, up against the decks that I've tested against, Data Vault has been a little bit more powerful. Again, there are a lot of different options in the meta right now, and there are a lot of decks that, well, we're going to be testing once we actually see what the meta shapes up to see whether or not the ECL is actually worthwhile. One of the things with ECL is that it kind of changes the direction of the deck from very much a mid-range value control shell to, well, a mid-range, a true mid-range shell, in my opinion. You play things more like Gideon, Darth Vader as ECL options, a little bit more aggressive nature from that deck, and can put on a ton of pressure, whereas the Data Vault is truly a little bit more of the controlling variant. But nonetheless, I do think Qi'ra Data Vault and Qi'ra ECL are going to be two very important decks to watch, and I don't think Qi'ra Data Vault is getting any weaker, and it is going to be one of the decks to beat in set 5. This is one of those that I do think is going to be top 5 of the meta, no questions asked. One of the things with Qi'ra Data Vault is even though you're not getting ECL, you still have a great 7-drop play with Darth Vader, both of them, right? The old Darth Vader, the original 5/7 ambush, great. Got all your different villainy plays that you can play, but then you also have Time Intervention Darth Vader for 7, and guess what? That is still disgustingly good. You're still going to be deleting a unit as well as probably hitting another one. So you got so many options with Qi'ra. This deck is truly a powerhouse. And for the last one for today's list, and probably the one I am most excited about because I do think it is really scary to see, is Han 2. You have a ton of new additions with this deck, and you can go so many different directions. Honestly, the list you're seeing here is not necessarily what I would run as an entire list, because there's so many options in terms of cards you can run. I wanted to throw them up on the screen so you guys could see. So first off, what are we doing new with Han? Why is he so much more interesting? Well, for one, from set 4, Han Data Vault as well as Han ECL are two of the best decks, period. So already we're starting off at a great spot. But with the Force synergies, you are doing so many different things that the new meta, or the meta in general from set 4, has shifted towards. First off, you got an amazing couple of early game plays, period. Tarkin Town isn't nearly as popular as it was before, so playing out things like Obi-Wan or Sundari Peacekeeper to start kind of putting things on the board, or most importantly, Grogu on turn 1 to absolutely annihilate your opponent's board with just constant healing and getting more value to the Han action is disgusting. Grogu is one of the best turn 1 plays in the entire game with Han, of course. Obviously, no other deck could be playing it on turn 1 realistically, but with Han, it is absolutely disgusting. Because of the new Force additions like Obi-Wan, Gunji, Grogu, Ethkoth, Kiadi, you get to play Force Throw, which is now a 1 resource interaction event, which is incredible when you're trying to scale up into the mid game, because then guess what? Not only do we have incredible early plays because of the way Han works, but a lot of our stuff does something when it comes into play. And that's something that's really important for Han, because Han damages the unit. So if it's something that needs to get an attack in, it can be a little bit more risky. Now, some cards are just too good to pass up, like Poe Dameron, but things like, Kiadi Mundi, well, suddenly you play it, it's a 4/2, but now you draw 2 cards. Great, that's exactly what I want in a deck that's giving me free ramp on my leader. We've got things like Mace Windu, which is going to be deployed and deal 4 to something. Caloran Beck, which is going to be deployed as a 7/5, and, well, you get to grab something else, like Obi-Wan or a Grogu. You got things like Home 1 and Yoda on the 8 resource, which can just start, well, in Yoda's case, controlling the board by knocking out units, or Home 1's case by bringing things back. And in some cases, because we have so many resources in the game, in a lot of situations, because the games go so long, I've had situations where I play home 1, bring back Kellerin back for a total of, well, because home 1 costs 7 with Han, it is now 7 resources plus 4, so 11 resources, grabbing you home 1, Kellerin back, and a 3-drop from your deck. You got things like Qi'ra Green, which you could still play a little bit earlier. This deck is absolutely fantastic. A couple of cards that you could absolutely swap out, things like Champs and Duos, Sundari Peacekeeper, General's Blade, Resupply. Actually, this whole section right here, I've seen so many different variants. Things with a little bit more early game options, like Sabine Wren, just a 2-drop that fits into the curve. Things that are more late game focused or interaction focused with like Open Fire. There are just so many different things you can do with this deck, but the power level of being able to refill your hand with Chaotic Immunity, immediately impact the board with Mace Windu, and the brand new, basically new Darth Vader for heroism, Kellerin back into home 1 is one of the most oppressive curves alongside your Darth Vader into Darth Vader curves that Qi'ra has. Now heroism has something that can just absolutely fill the board, which is really, really scary. And then you can top it all off by dropping someone in and actually killing something and being a threat for the future. Some of the curves in this game, like going into Yoda and then into the late game and then following that up with a Mace Windu, so you're like dealing 4 times 2 to something because you use the Force Mace Windu, is very scary. And the value this is able to provide is something to worry about. I do think this is another list that can absolutely contend for a top 5 spot in the meta. Again, what the exact makeup of the deck is really going to depend on what lists we're fighting, but this is one that can also be run, Han that is, as other aspects. I think the one other one that I'm really curious about is Han Vigilance, which is something that was back in set 2 and, well, a little bit in set 3, but you have things like the new Yaddle. You can still be playing the Force throws, things like Shatterpoint, playing the Force synergies still, but with the vigilance side of things, which is still exceptionally powerful. So I'm really, really curious to see where Han ends up, but I do think Han Command is the more appealing of the two as of right now. And I'm really, really interested to see where this list ends up and what modifications people make to it. But with an early game absolute domination and things like Grogu, or even just dropping some earlier plays into, you know, Champs and Dulo or Ethkoth to ramp you super, super early into things that are going to remove things from the board like Force Throw and Mace Windu. Yeah, Han is a powerhouse to contend with as well. I think both Qi'ra and Han have some major, major options in the metagame and are going to be some of the better lists. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. These are just some of the lists that have immediately popped into my mind as, oh, I got to watch these ones because they are the most interesting to me. Even something like Qi'ra, which isn't fundamentally making a lot of changes, it could change the entire direction the deck is played based on whether Data Vault or ECL is going to be an option for you. That is what makes it interesting. Han adapting the new Force synergy, and obviously Talzin and Obi-Wan not even being in the meta in general. We've got some amazing decks to contend with, and, well, we're going to have to wait and see as to whether or not it's going to be beatable. Or they're going to ban Force Throw, I suppose. I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but I could be wrong. Force Throw is a very powerful card. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you all for the next one.